today. UFC Mexico is in the books, and the real question is, who messed it up? Was it the fighters in lackluster fights, or was it extremely lackluster judging? And PFL versus Bellator. We now know who will face Francis Ngannou in the smart cage. If you believe that Francis Ngannou will ever step into the smart cage. Also, was it a win that Brandon Royval won? Was it a win that Brian Ortega won? Are either one of these wins for the UFC? We will discuss all of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. What's up, guys? We right back at it. We right back with it. Your boy Matt back here delivering the MMA news. Delivering that news for you. You know what I'm talking about. Let's kick it all off with Bellator first. All right, we're just going to go over just a couple of fights. No big deal. Let's start off with Aaron Pico goes out there and gets a win. Cool beans, bro. Also, shout out to Clarissa Shields, who goes out there and just barely wins her fight. But also proves my point, because most people in MMA, maybe except for me, absolutely hate Clarissa Shields. So if I was the PFL, I would strap a rocket to her, because she is someone that people will, I don't know about pay, but will watch your shows to see her get beat. And from what I see, it would be extremely easy to find somebody to beat her. You should just literally match her up accordingly. You know what I'm saying? Stretch it out, put her in there with a few other girls that are going to stand with her, and then wham, wham, put her in there with somebody else that's going to take her out. Cash your checks. Anyway, let's also talk about Umpa Kasanganai goes out there and takes an L, just barely, against Johnny Eblen. You know, this was kind of shocking to see. I wouldn't hold it against Johnny Eblen just based out of the fact that, you know, who knows how much he really trained for the fight. I'm not trying to cope, not saying that he didn't look good, because he didn't look good. You know what I'm saying? But you have to wonder how much he actually trained for the fight to try to get prepared for it. How much he thought it was going to be a walk in the park. You know, who knows? I mean, in my opinion, he seems like a guy that's being held down by his contract. I believe, based on the people he trains with and all the fighters that are in the UFC that big him up all the time, I suspect that he would much rather be fighting in the UFC, but his contract is keeping him tied to Bellator/PFL. Nevertheless, Johnny Eblen goes out there and just barely gets the win. Then in the main event, we had Ferreira go out there and beat Ryan Bader, thus proving Ryan Bader's, I mean, it just kind of put just a nice period on Ryan Bader's career. This is a guy that when the lights are shining the brightest on him, he never truly rises to the occasion. He'll ink out a win here and there, but on the fights where Bellator really needed him to go out there and blow the doors off of somebody and win, you know, like in really big, you know, huge fashion, he's never done it. You know what I'm saying? Those are the fights he just barely wins. And in this one, for the sake of, you know, having someone that's barely known by the public to go in there and fight Francis Ngannou, Ryan Bader goes in there, drops the ball again, again. And just like I told you in my pre-fight breakdown, Ferreira's chance to win is he's going to have to rush him. He's going to have to rush him early in the first round and try to knock him out. And that's exactly what happened. As I said, if Ryan Bader could just weather that storm and take him down to the ground, he would have won that fight. So this fight, in my opinion, was Ryan Bader's to lose. And he lost. So that's that. Let's move on from the PFL Bellator debacle, because the pacing was really weird on that card. You know, Pitbull not being on the card was another loss. There was a lot of losses, as well as I just don't really know if we're ever going to see Francis Ngannou step into the smart cage to fight anybody, let alone Ferreira. But nevertheless, that was the PFL versus Bellator first card. I think they'll have another one coming in a few months, so we'll see how that one shapes up. Let's move from there. We're going to move over to UFC Mexico that went down Saturday night, where in the main event, Brandon Royval goes out there, Raw Dog, I should say, Brandon Royval, goes out there and defeats Brandon Moreno via scorecard. Man, this was a this was a weird fight. Not as action-packed as I thought it was going to be. In my opinion, I scored it for Brandon Moreno 3-2, but I can see a world where Brandon Royval goes out there and takes it. And I'm not really sure what happened with Brandon Moreno. Like, he was doing really well. He was doing well with the jab. He was doing well. He almost had like a little... kept catching with almost like a little, it wasn't like a check hook, but it was like a little hook he kept catching Brandon with. But for the most part, his primary weapon was like a long-rangey punch into a leg kick. That combination was really working for him, but Royval went out there and put the pace on him. He definitely had the more volume of strikes, or larger volume, compared to Brandon Moreno. But what I would question is how many of those strikes landed and how many of them were significant. That was why I would have given the fight to Brandon Moreno. But I can see a world where Royval goes out there and wins. I'm just not sure what happened to Moreno. I don't know if... I'm not sure if the elevation got to him. He just seemed to be very slow by maybe about the early in the third round, maybe the end of the second round. He just seemed like he was like moving in quicksand, like he just couldn't really do a lot. So I'm not really sure what was going on there. I'm not sure if he was dealing with the injury or maybe he had a broken hand, or I'm not really sure what was going on. But Brandon Royval goes out there and gets the win. You got to believe that the UFC was probably leaning toward Brandon Moreno getting the win, especially getting the win without taking any damage, because they're going to need somebody to fight Pantoja in Rio in the, I believe that's UFC 301. Now that they've kind of burned Alex Pereira and they're using that fight at UFC 300, they're going to need Pantoja to fight in the main event, and it probably would have been a bigger fight if he fought Brandon Moreno. Now they have Brandon Royval, so I'm not sure if they're going to try to use him against Pantoja, because, even though Royval goes out there and gets the win over Moreno, I can't really... can you guys see him convincingly, like, going out there and beating, Alexandre Pantoja? We talking about many men. Pantoja, you know what I'm saying? We talking about Alexandre Pantoja, the man that just goes out there, just like an Indiana Jones, you know what I'm saying? If y'all seen Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom, you know what I'm saying? It might be a little bit old for you all. Man just takes his hand and just reaches in the homie's chest and pulls his heart out. That's what Pantoja does to his opponents, you know what I'm talking about? If y'all don't know that, Google that, y'all can see what I'm talking about. Bro, I just don't feel like it's going to be as big of a fight as it would have been against Brandon Moreno. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. And I don't know. Maybe they throw a lob up to Manel Kopp, tell him, look, dude, if you could convincingly make the weight, we'll give you a title fight in Rio. I'm not sure. But it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to try to figure out in between now and UFC 301. In the co-main event, was the biggest shocker of the night, in my opinion, where Brian Ortega goes out there and defeats Yair Rodriguez. Man, this fight was so annoying in a way. I'm not against Brian Ortega. I'm not a hater, although I'm not a big, huge fan. But it was just a very annoying fight, because you had Yair Rodriguez go out there, and Yair always seems like he folds under the tremendous, huge pressure of a moment. And you always have something weird or strange happen when he gets in those moments in these major fights. Title fights, fights there in Mexico. He always seems like something weird happens or he folds under the pressure, you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, this was his fight to lose or, his fight to win, however you want to put that. And he goes out there and he loses it. He was doing well in the first round, but I believe that so he drops Brian Ortega, and I feel like after he dropped Brian Ortega, he was too eager to try to grapple with him on the ground instead of trying to stay standing and launching some standing ground strikes, like meaning you're standing over the opponent and you're striking downward, because you don't really want to clinch or lock up with a guy like Brian Ortega. This is coming in an opinion of someone who doesn't fight, but I would have kind of maintained my distance and maybe struck from the top while still standing. So that way, if he reaches for a leg, tries to grapple your arm, you just back up and tell the referee to have him stand up. Or once he dropped him, I probably would have just told the referee to have him stand up anyway, because you got a good chance of dropping him again. Yair's issue in this fight, and the reason why he lost the fight, is for some reason he kept engaging in the grappling of Brian Ortega when they would get close together, especially on the ground. And it's like, homie, why would you fight Brian Ortega like that, of all people? Like a man who has made an entire career off of getting beaten up and losing a fight, and then in the last minute pulling off some crazy submission hold because somebody got too close to him. So, nevertheless, brand new beak and eagle taloned Brian Ortega, that you'll get that reference if you saw his pre-fight press conference. Bro, this homie goes out there and he gets the win. And shout out to him. He rolled his ankle during Bruce Buffer announcing him, which, you felt for the guy when you saw that, because you was like, oh no, bro. He finally makes it back in the octagon, and while he's warming up, while he's getting announced, he rolls his ankle. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, this dude has bad luck. But this homie goes out there in front of his ex-girlfriend, Tracy Cortez, and puts on the show and beats Yair Rodriguez and messed up all of the UFC's plans. No doubt the UFC, if Yair Rodriguez would have won, they was going to Spain. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they was going to sign that fight. Yair Rodriguez was going to face Ilia Topuria for the featherweight championship in Spain. Here comes old sharpened talons, brand new eagle beak Brian Ortega, and just ruined all of that. So none of that is happening. So I don't know. This might have worked in Alexander Volkanovski's favor, because now I could definitely see the UFC kind of measuring which fighter's going to be bigger in Spain and saying Ilia versus Volk. Let's give Volk a rematch in Spain, and let's rock that way. That's probably going to be a much bigger fight, probably going to sell bigger than Sharp Talons Brian Ortega versus Ilia Topuria, because Brian Ortega is not really going to engage in a ton of trash talk, a ton of back and forth. So what you're going to have is Ilia Topuria literally saying whatever he wants to Brian Ortega, and Brian Ortega just chilling and being like, you don't know, man. You don't know, because when an eagle goes in the woods, he breaks his beak. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, Brian Ortega's not really getting ready to engage in a lot of that. So, nevertheless, he goes out there, he gets the win. Yair Rodriguez goes home sad again in Mexico. And that's what that was, So, we'll see where they choose to go from there. We also had Daniel Zellhuber step in there with Francisco Prado. This was a good fight, like Prado in a way kind of reminds me of, not quite the same fighting style, but in his striking, kind of reminds me a little bit of Marvin Vettori in a way. Like the way he's got that big blockhead as well, you know what I'm saying? And the way when he throws with reckless abandonment. Like he throws with intent to knock you out, you know what I'm saying? This homie's not going in there to give you no pitter patter shots. These ain't Nick Diaz shots, you know what I'm saying? This homie goes in there to lay you out, you know what I'm talking about? So with that being said, man, Daniel Zellhuber went out there and did his thing. He used his range. He used his jab. It was good to see a long, rangy guy actually use his jab. You know what I'm saying? Most of the time, these homies are long and rangy and can just hold their arm out and literally keep a guy at distance. And then they want to go in there and grapple, and then they get submitted. And you're like, oh, okay. So, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to Daniel Zellhuber. He goes out there. He gets a major, big win in front of his people there in Mexico. Did well on the mic after. And all around, it was a good show. And it was also a good showing for Prado. Definitely shows that he's got that chin. You know what I'm saying? He can take quite a few shots. It eventually caught up to him. But nevertheless, he definitely showed, He definitely showed. He's. I'm not gonna say he's gonna ever be a contender or anything, but if they want somebody to go in there and bring a dog fight to another fighter, you need to phone call Francisco Prado and let him do his thing. So shout out to them. Shout out to Zellhuber for getting the win. Yasmin Irigaray versus Sam Hughes. Yasmin goes out there, does her thing. Stand up looked great. Stand up looked on point. She went out there. She did her thing. She gets the major win. Sam Hughes has actually she's been looking pretty good here lately. Pretty solid. But it's obvious. I mean, Yasmin. That's who the UFC is banking on. That's who they're getting behind. Like I said, I believe her last fight was just a stepping stone. Now she knows what she needs to tackle again, what she needs to work on in the gym. And she came back out there. She put on a good strike fest showing. Just a strike fest. You know what I'm saying? Kicks, punches, everything. It all looked good. Devastating body kicks. She definitely did her thing. So, shout out to her for going out there and getting the win over Sam Hughes. Next, Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Manuel Torres goes out there. I mean, made this fight was super exciting. Shout out to Chris Duncan. First off, he was going at the Mexican media the entire week. Comes out there with the painted face. He walks out to the octagon to El Chapo by the game. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he was really going at the Mexican people all week. He was really trying to drum up a little bit of energy in that fight. But Manuel Torres, he drummed up all the energy. Went out there, took the back, submitted the man, choked him out. It was devastating. Then there was a fight in the crowd after. Manuel Torres is trying to calm the crowd down. Shout out to the homie if you've seen the fight online, on Instagram, on Twitter. Shout out to the big homie with the black button-up shirt that just hit somebody with a devastating left. I mean, it wasn't just a regular left. The left was devastating and sent a large man toppling to the ground. Just boom. Great stuff to see. Shout out to Manuel Torres. Goes out there, gets a big win in front of his people, and we're going to see where they're going to move him from here. So, just kind of skimming through the rest of the card, we had Ronnie Barcelos goes out there and gets a win. I didn't see that one happening. Shout out to the old dog, the old veteran Barcelos for going out there and getting the win. Jesus Aguilar, he goes out there, he gets a win over Mateus. That one was controversial. You definitely could have gave that fight to Mateus, but I'll let you on a little secret. I bet on Jesus on DraftKings, so I'm glad that he won that one. So I'll take it. But nevertheless, shout out to DraftKings. Holla at your boy. I'm out here promoting y'all every week. Holla at me. Anyway, Jesus goes out there and gets the win. How about Edgar Chairez stepping in there with Daniel Lacerda? And Edgar goes out there and gets the win. I'm a huge fan of Chairez. You know what I'm saying? The man comes out. He's got the bandana tied around his neck. He's got the bullet belt, you know what I'm saying, wrapped around him, crisscrossed around him. Awesome to see. You love to see fighters like that with a little bit of flair. So shout out to him. That was also a tremendous win by him. Shout out to him on that. Let's see. We had Faraz Zahim go out there and get his win over Puelis. So that was good to see. That was somebody I picked to win. We saw Ronaldo Rodriguez go out there and defeat Bundar. You know, that was something on the last minute. I pulled the trigger on DraftKings and I bet on Rodriguez. I didn't really know, but I just had a feeling. I liked how the odds were looking. So shout out again. DraftKings holla at me. Shout out to Rodriguez. Oh, I just hit the mic there. But shout out to him for getting that win for himself and for your boy. Outside of that, we have Felipe Dos Santos, who probably got gifted a win there, but I'm all for that because I bet on him on DraftKings, so shout out to him. And outside of that, we have Muhammad Naimov defeated Eric Silva. Basically, Eric Silva defeated himself when he was backing up against the cage and tore his meniscus. So, or maybe it was his MCL. I believe it was his MCL. Nevertheless, bro, that was UFC Mexico as well as Bellator versus PFL. I'm calling it Bellator versus PFL because they won more of the fights, more of the battles. But, you know, nevertheless, bro. Oh, and also another fight that happened on Bellator versus PFL. AJ McKee goes out there and does his thing. Gets homie from the PFL up out of there extremely quickly. Talking about Clay Collard, who is not an easy guy to defeat quickly. And AJ McKee's like, pop, pop, pop. That's it. That's it. It was fast, you know. So, nevertheless, shout out to him as well. So, that was Bellator versus PFL as well as the UFC's latest rendition of a card there in Mexico. So, there it was, Viva la Mexico. It was pretty cool. For the most part, the card did have some down moments, you know. Wasn't as action-packed, I think, at moments, but it definitely packed a lot of action. So, nevertheless, man, we're moving on. We have a rough Apex card this week, so we're going to be breaking that down very soon. We'll check that one out. But nevertheless, I appreciate you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And I'll check you next time. Peace.